Hello, it's Sandra Lee. So today we are making sauerkraut, and I am going to film this in stages so that you can see it. Hopefully this is going to work. Okay, so I have vegetables here preparing to be grated up. We have over there cabbages, carrots, daikon radish. The garlic in that bowl is going to be used. It's going to be sliced, not grated. And so all of those things there, there's going to be onions too. They're going to be going in with the food processor. So the carrots are going to get shredded, and then the daikon is going to get shredded, and the cabbage is going to use a slicing disc. This is a 4x4 millimeter slicing, so that all of those things are going to go in the bowl in their respective modes. I'm going to pause it here and come back in a while. So we have the next stage of making sauerkraut. In the bowl, we have grated green cabbage, grated red cabbage, a whole pile of carrots, and a pile of daikon. I'm going to mix in salt. So in that bowl, I'm going to have half a cup of salt, maybe a little bit more than half a cup of salt. And I'm going to start putting it into jars soon, which I will show you in a minute. I'm going to put the salt in and then mix the salt in to the vegetables. Okay, so we are at the next stage of making sauerkraut. Here it is, both of those bowls that had cabbage, carrots, and daikon radish in them got mixed up with salt, and then the volume reduces. So some of the water comes out of the vegetables, and we will be keeping that water in the brine. So I put salt in and mixes it up with the vegetables, causes the vegetables to wilt a little bit, releasing some of their water. And then we're going to take this mixture and we are going to put it in those jars there. Got some cut up onions and sliced up garlic that I am going to layer in there. So let's see if I can enable you to watch this while I pack one or more of these jars. Okay, so I have a mason jar. I have sterilized these earlier. I'm going to take a handful of this cabbage mixture, take a little bit of sliced up garlic, put that in there, put some more cabbage in it. So you can see my jar's getting a little more full here, pushing it down. I'm going to take some of these pieces of onion and put it in there. Put some more cabbage mixture in. A little bit more garlic. More cabbage stuff. Some more onion. So I want there to be some room left at the top of the jar. And I am pushing these vegetables down. So that's it for this phase. I'm going to fill all of these jars and then be back with you again in a bit. Okay, this is the next phase of making sauerkraut. You can see that I have a whole bunch of mason jars filled with the cabbage carrot mixture. And you can see that the liquid is up to here and it's covering the vegetables that are in the jars, or pretty much covering the vegetables that are in the jars. That's just what came out of the vegetables because I mixed it with the salt. That's the liquid that weeps out of the vegetables, and then it fills up the empty space in the jar around the vegetables. If there wasn't enough of that liquid, then I top it up with some salt water. So I am going to do the next part, and part of it is going to involve making some salt water. I'm going to use the salt that I use. The salt that I put into the vegetables is the same salt that I'm using here. This is Celtic salt. That's the kind of salt that I use. And I'm just taking some salt and I'm putting it in the water here. And I am going to use this. I'm going to put it into a little plastic bag in the top of the jar, which you will see me do in a minute. But there is that salt water, and that will dissolve there a little bit. Now I'm going to take one of these jars and I'm going to take a cabbage leaf. So before grating up all the cabbage, I pulled off a bunch of leaves, and I want to take a piece of leaf and put it in the top of the jar so that it holds all the vegetables down, and then there's going to be liquid above it. So you will see what I mean in a minute here. So I'm going to take this cabbage leaf and break it. So I have a rough circle shaped piece of cabbage. And again, its job is to hold the vegetables down inside the jar, okay? And I'm going to take it and I'm going to push it into the top of the jar, pushing down the vegetables, and there will probably be some little pieces that escape, and that's okay. I want to minimize the amount of that if possible, and that just decreases the chance that there's going to be mold. So I've got that in there. So you can see that there's liquid covering all of the vegetables and covering that piece of cabbage that I just put in. Okay. And I am going to take one of these little pieces of technology, a very small, this is a snack Ziploc bag. And I'm going to take this bag and I'm going to put some of this salt water I just made into the bag. And this is a little weight, and it's going to hold that piece of cabbage down, because as the sauerkraut ferments, it's going to bubble and liquid is going to come out of the top of this jar. That's what we expect to have happen, and it will. And so I've put this plastic bag with some salt water in it into the top of the jar. These are lids that have a little vent in it. And so I'm going to put this on top of the jar with a band for the mason jar so that it holds that in place like, oh, and I like to dry the top of the jar off a little bit because it's salty water. And I just don't want to cause too much corrosion inside the band, although they do get corroded over time. And there we go. That's a jar of sauerkraut that in several days will be ready and will get put in the refrigerator. So there will be another phase after I get all these jars done, and then we will be on to the next piece. Okay, so I have a whole tray full of jars. They've got the lids on. These are lids again that have little vents in them. So as there's going to be bubbles that come up. So the process of fermenting the vegetables produces bubbles that need to be released from the jar. So those are going to bubble out. I'm going to eventually wind up pushing the material down because the bubbles wind up pushing up and taking up some of the volume of the jar, and I just need to push them down. But I'll use a, fork to push that down and over the next couple of days. And then the weather is warm right now, which is why we're making these ferments now, because it will ferment faster and be ready to eat. And then we'll put them in the refrigerator. And then I'll take the vent lids off, put on regular mason jar lids, and then we are set. These vegetables are going to last for probably until next year. So that's it. I hope this has been educational for you, and you might go out and make some of your own fermented vegetables at home. It's super easy. You can go out and buy them, like real fermented vegetables, but you're going to pay a whole lot more for them. This is so easy to do, and great for you. When you make them yourself, the bacteria and the yeast and things like that that are in the air in your natural environment, those are the best that are for you in your health. So when I make them in my own home, then they have the perfect mix of microbes in there for me. That's it. So if you found this interesting, give me a comment. Thanks. Bye.